Good afternoon. Welcome to Trading the Close on this Monday. I'm Toni Valliere with Verified Investing. Here's what's making headlines today. GameStop soars 70% at one point after Roaring Kitty posts online for the first time in about 3 years. Roaring Kitty is a former marketer for Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance who drove the GameStop mania of 2021, you may remember. And the rally today seemed to impact AMC stock as well, giving it a boost. OpenAI launches a faster and cheaper AI model and desktop version of ChatGPT. Kraft Heinz is exploring options to sell Oscar Mayer. Shares of Novavax stock jumps as much as 50% after the company made a multi-billion-dollar deal with a French drug maker. StoneCo Limited and BR will be reporting earnings after the closing bell today. So let's get a check of where things stand right now, just minutes before the closing bell. We are seeing the Dow down slightly today, 56 points, 0.14%. The NASDAQ actually up 46 points, 0.28%. The S&P up just slightly. Oil up over $1. Gold down $22. And Bitcoin up over $1,600 at this time. Chief Market Strategist Gareth Soloway joins me now with a recap of the day's trading. We have to touch on GameStop and, of course, AMC. But can you try and explain to me, and I even heard somebody in our trading room, Lawton, you may hear his name on the game plan, say, how does one person have so much control? And I even asked, I said, did he write something? Did he give out a specific message? No. These are just memes that he's putting out.
Yeah, but it's just
and
the
that
fact
triggers.
that he hadn't posted in years.
Sure.
And so, you know, we saw GameStop last week starting to go up a little bit, and then finally he posted, which just all of a sudden, it basically was like the bat sign in the sky, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone rushes in. It's just, this is the kicker, and what people have to understand is that, you know, if you looked at GameStop today, it got as high as, I think, $38 and then crashed down below 30, and I think at last I checked it was around 30. What people have to understand is the psychology is now different than 2021, and everyone's hoping that it's the same, but the problem is there were a lot of people that bought in GameStop, AMC, a lot of these other ones, a lot higher back then, and they actually got crushed.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do they not remember what happened last time?
Right, and so this is the kicker. A lot of them do, which is why they will sell before it gets to those levels. They'll take profits this time. So they learned, you know, everyone learns. And so instead, last time it was just like, hold on, don't ever sell, screw these hedge funds that are shorting, versus now people are like, oh, wait, I did that last time and ended up losing. So now that it's up 50 or 100%, let me take that off the table. And what that will do is it'll make it so these things don't have those same sort of runs. So they can still go higher, but there will now be consistent sellers because people just listen, you don't want to get crushed again. If you're up 100%, take that money and run.
Exactly. I know you probably want to start with the S&P, and then I do want you to bring up GameStop.
Yeah,
I know you talked about it this morning on the game plan, so we can check and see where it's at now.
So basically today's action, so the first thing that kind of caught me that was amazing was that the volume today is the lightest volume in the S&P since the day after Thanksgiving last year. All right, so I think that was a half day. And so so what that does is it tells me that, number one, there's no economic news this morning. There's earnings season is mostly over. We have a couple companies this week, but then everyone's waiting on the PPI data on Wednesday. And so it just like it's almost like it's a Monday. It almost felt like midsummer, kind of like everyone's on vacation today because everyone's waiting. And so we see today, I mean, you did open up a little bit, but in general, it's, you know, aside from a couple blips here, the volume was super light. We are just seeing basically a flattish market on the S&P. The Dow today looks like it'll end down. That'll be its first down day in, I think, 9 days now.
At least,
8 up days, and today finally a down day. So it was kind of due, but it certainly isn't anything big. And I also think generally tomorrow will be another light day because everyone's just waiting on that PPI data on Wednesday, which will be huge. Now,
I was just going to ask how much of an impact, so that could have a big...
I mean, that is why the volume is so, it's going to be big. And the key is the psychology is now, and this is where the psychology of trading comes in. So you've basically had 3 PPI datas that are hotter than expected. And so it's conditioned people to be like, oh my goodness, this is going to be hot, which makes me think sometimes it might be, what if it's just a little bit lighter, and then everyone like breathes the sigh of relief and the markets maybe get a bit. I don't know if that'll happen, but it wouldn't be surprising because, you know, it's the same thing with a stock. When a stock goes up into earnings, right, when you go up, it's pricing in where they have to come out even better. And now you're doing the same thing with PPI, is it's been hotter, so everyone's assuming it's going to be hot. All now it has to do is come in kind of at expectations, and people will probably be like, oh, okay, you know, it's not going back to where we were 2 years ago in inflation. So we'll have to see. But S&P, almost nothing going on here. You mentioned again, we'll go to GameStop in just a minute. Spider S&P chart, again, we've really had a very impressive rally to the upside. Multiple levels looking more and more like maybe we're kissing this double top up here. There are a couple levels up here, but to be honest, it's been a very resilient float to the upside. The only thing concerning is that when the markets go up on light volume, and a lot of this has been very light volume, it tells you institutions are not participating. They're not the heavy buyers, because otherwise we'd have heavier volume. Now, they're not selling either. So again, if they were selling, we'd obviously have heavier volume too. But it seems like they're just letting the retail crowd buy up the market. The question is, when do they come out? Do they buy it? Probably not, but will they come in and sell at some point?
I'm curious, some of those companies that reported earnings last week that plummeted upon their earnings report, did you do any trades with those this week for that bounce back?
So I haven't done anything yet this week, but I did nibble a little bit on Starbucks when it was down that much. These moves that are so crazy for the history. I look at each stock and I say, was this a normal move, or was it really outside of its zone? And if it's outside of its zone, you'll probably get these little bounce backs. So I didn't actually look and see what Starbucks is doing today, but that actually makes me want to look real quick
Zoom
here.
was one of them.
Yeah, so you can see here. So here again, on the day, I think we got in right down here. So we were down a tiny bit. Now we're in the money a little bit. This isn't going to be something I'm going to stick around in a long time, though. Maybe just a little bit more upside and then kind of just grab the money and run, because I do worry at some point if the markets turn back down, stocks that reported bad earnings are going to see a move back down. People will run from those. So that's very, very true. Let's touch on GameStop. So GameStop was amazing because as much as Roaring Kitty had an impact, the chart still gave us a top today. In fact, I did short it in the live day trading room and made money today. So if you look at this amazing channel. So just by connecting, this is going back to 2022, the low, all these lows, just connect a trend line right through them and then drag a parallel line up to these highs right up here, and it basically gave you today's high at $38.20. And since then, when you can see, we're back to $30.45. So it's still a great move on the day, but that's a $8 move from the highs is a massive pullback as well. Be interesting to see, does it gap up tomorrow? Does it try to break here, or does it come back in? But just from this low a couple weeks ago, incredible, 200-300% move, incredible.
Do you see more of a sell-off being likely after what's already been happening?
Yeah, I think tomorrow you'll probably have some follow-up buyers that maybe get it back to 35. But right now, this is the line in the sand. And unless this is broken, this is probably, even if you go up like this, eventually you come back like this to the downside. So I would favor the downside. I just think, again, there's not a fundamental basis behind this. Short squeeze, yes. Meme craze, yes. But I just don't see the same psychological factors. And you don't have the same liquidity out there, which is a big thing. In 2021, the government was sending checks and money out to everyone. People were sitting home. They had nothing else to do. They were like, all right, I got all this money. I'm not spending on travel and everything. Let's just put it all into these crazy stocks. People are now starting to struggle, and we know that from the earnings that we've seen from Starbucks, from Disney, all these other companies. So they don't have the same money to kind of throw in these things at this point.
What about AMC?
Yeah, that was kind of a late day runner. I did get a little short off. I was trying to get 10,000 shares short on this. I only got filled about 2,400 and change. I did make I think I made about $600 on it on a pullback here. I made 25 cents a share. But same thing. Just an incredible run up. Topped out around this 585 level or so, pulled back just a little bit on the charts. But again, these are wild ones, and you got to be really careful if you're going long or short. You can see if we zoom out, look at where this thing was back in the meme craze. Incredible move to $400 and change. Look at that up there.
Wow.
So isn't that nuts? Now, in all fairness, this is important, and this is what a lot of investors,
back when we did go to the movies, still, right?
Right. Well, that was even during COVID, but everyone just wanted to go so badly just
to get out. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that people have to understand here is you can't compare apples to apples. So people look at this and say, wow, this could go back to $400. It's not the same. In fact, they issued so much new stock here that if it went back to 400, it would basically be double the market cap that it was here. So again, that's just something that a lot of investors don't really realize, is that would be a huge difference. The company would be double the size that it was when it was at 400 if it just went back to that same price point. So just, again, they had to do that because they were going out of business. But the company used the share price to their advantage by issuing more shares during that period, which again isn't great for the retail investor that gets stuck with it. But that's what they did to raise capital so that they could still survive. And even with this, they're barely surviving at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, will you watch this over the next few days? Will you possibly short this again? I know you did today.
Yeah, I mean, so if it's all about if it's in action. So if tomorrow I see crazy moves that are emotional. So as a trader, as a day trader, this is swing trading too, is I look for emotional responses that don't align with reality.
Okay.
And that's where these situations come in, and that gives me an edge to think, okay, logic eventually prevails. Now, it can take a long time, as we saw back here, but again, going small and going very carefully, that's where you have your advantage, is that thinking logically, using the charts, which allow you to be logical versus just like the hype that's on social media, that enables you to kind of be, more sane.
Sure.
So
ARM
yeah,
was
really
another
interesting.
one.
ARM had a nice little move today. That was up about 7.7%. What was interesting about this one is let's go to that chart there. This had a nice little move up, but this is still a bearish pattern, so people just have to realize that, is that as long as it doesn't take out this, and there's going to be so much resistance right here. You can see actually you could extend this back even further. All this sideways chop before the breakdown, this creates a lot of resistance up around 120, 122. And this, again, is a bearish in spirit of pattern. So eventually I do still think this goes down to gap fill down here. We'll have to see when it does that. But the other thing to think about here is that these guys announced an AI chip that they're developing for 2025. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, competition, right? NVIDIA competition. So this is just one more semiconductor company that's coming out with a competitor to NVIDIA. And this is why I can't help but be 6 to 12 to 18 months out bearish on NVIDIA, because their margins are you're going to have so many, everyone's trying to produce these AI chips, and eventually that's going to hurt NVIDIA's margins. So we'll see.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Now, it doesn't mean their earnings next week won't be amazing.
Sure.
Because they don't have the competition yet, and I still think that's going to be amazing. But at some point in a certain amount of time, the competitors will just be massive.
Intel, if you don't mind bringing that one up as well. I believe it went up 2.5%.
Yes, this was one that was kind of due for a bounce, right? I mean, it was crushed on earnings. It was already trading down. It did kind of come into this little bit of support here, so you can see how much downside this has had. This was that earnings gap down right here, and it did kind of come into this little level. So it did bounce today a little bit, but the negative is it was up higher and actually came back in. So this is one where, again, if the markets can stay afloat, it probably can come up and maybe fill this gap here. But at some point, a weak stock in a strong market, when that market comes back down, even if it's just a pullback, it probably eventually breaks lower. And so again, that's the tricky thing about Intel here in this situation.
You pointed out a really obvious pattern on Bitcoin this morning on the game plan, the inverse head and shoulders.
Yes. Yeah, so again, in Bitcoin having a decent little move today, not too shabby, right? I mean, it's up, 1,000 or whatever it is today. But what I pointed out earlier was that I just happened to see this pattern formation, which is an inverse head and shoulders, right? And so in general, when this triggers, and this is the big thing, a lot of people look at this and they're like, oh, that's bullish. It's actually not bullish yet because it hasn't triggered. It's when you take that high and this high and you connect a trend line, if price can get above that, that's when it becomes bullish. And if that does happen, then you should easily go to the high end here and maybe even break out. So really, as a chartist, what I'm watching is to see, okay, does it violate this line? Does it get above here? And if not, does it come back down here and negate that pattern, which would be very bearish. But right now, it is a pattern that's now what I would call on watch, to see if it can trigger, and if it triggers, you should at least test this. And honestly, if it gets back to the high end here, this is a bullish channel. Eventually, I think it breaks out.
Okay.
So again, if we ever get below this lower channel line, then that's different. Then we're heading much, much lower. But right now, you would give this a positive bias on this chart.
Do you also take the measurement from here to the high,
correct.
and then that kind of gives you the distance that...
So what's so cool about this, and I love this stuff, so if you take the low here and you shoot a line straight up to that line, you take that distance and replicate it. And what's super cool about this is that if you do that, and so you would add it to the breakout point. So the second it breaks out, wherever it is on the line, you add that amount. And what's super interesting about that is that you basically get your double top. right
Yes,
there.
yes.
So it's amazing how those things work out like that, and it just shows you that chances are if this does play, you at least hit double top, and then it just has to break there if it wants to go higher, but you probably get some consolidation off of that level.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Awesome. It is very cool stuff. I know there's so much to learn, and you can learn it all here for free. So why not tune in every single day, and then the game plan in the morning. Tomorrow we've got Home Depot, Alibaba, Sony, C Limited. That's pre-market, and then New Holdings and Next Tracker is after the market. So.
Yeah, I just want to bring up quickly, let's quickly look at Alibaba, because these are, you know, I've talked up the Chinese stocks. I've said these charts are really good. And I mean, look at the run that Alibaba's had just over the last 3 weeks or so. We were trading in the 60s. We're now in the mid 80s to the upside. And this just had one of those classic kind of, you know, you had your little bit of a move up and then this consolidation pattern, which is one of my favorites. And then you can see the break to the upside. I have no idea what it'll do tomorrow on earnings. To be honest, it's had a massive run, so maybe a little bit of a pullback. But I still think these things have further upside to go. And even looking at the K-Web, which is the ETF that tracks a lot of this stuff, wow, you can see even I annotated this a while back, and it's still on my chart. But I was even highlighting here on the chart. Let me try to zoom in a little bit more so you guys can see. But basically, I was highlighting that this is a channel, a bullish channel, right? So in fact, it almost looks like this is almost like Bitcoin, right? The same downward sloping channel. Here you got to the upside and you started to consolidate, bullish flag, and then kaboom. You can see this was drawn a while back because the price action's into the green here. But yeah, you can see right there that it played out perfectly on the chart.
We'll see tomorrow then.
Yeah.
It'll be very obvious. All right, Gareth, thank you very much.
Welcome.
We appreciate it. And tomorrow we have Lobo Tigre, a legendary mining stock speculator. He will be back on our show. So if you have any questions for him, just let me know in the comments. And remember, you can catch Gareth navigate the charts in real time every weekday morning before the opening bell, starting at 9 a.m. on his show. It's called The Game Plan, right here on the Verified YouTube channel. And that does it for us for Trading the Close today. We will be back tomorrow with Lobo, so make it a great rest of the day.